Go.
Okay. Thank you. So the Tom Bradford, as you can see from the screen, believes that these 10 kings themselves are Islamic nations. When we look at this particular part of Revelation, we have to remember that what we're dealing with here is Israel at this time. This isn't specifically Gentiles. This is specifically Israel. It's kind of the turning point was the 144,000 that were created, the witnesses that went out and evangelized. So you can, if you look at a map, and I didn't get one, but if you look at a map, there are 10 kings, 10 nations that would be around Israel that are Islamic. And so they would have that desire to destroy Israel. And we know that they don't like them as it is, and it's going to be seen as an opportunity for them to annihilate them and get rid of them. It also, when you, in their minds, Israel is more connected with the West than it is with the East. And if you've ever heard of Islamic rhetoric, you and I are part of the great Satan, okay? And so their desire would be to destroy Western civilization and replace it with Islamic thought and theology, because they see us as the great Satan. So you can kind of see how they would be thinking that they are doing God's will by getting rid of the great Satan, which is Christianity and Judaism. And they're going to be working under this delusion that they're doing God's work. And in reality, they're just creating more destruction for themselves. So let's go on. Verse 16. And the 10 horns which you saw and the beast, these will hate the harlot and will make her desolate and naked and will eat her flesh and will burn her up with fire. So this little confederation that has taken place is going to end. And this is about the midpoint in the tribulation period where this takes place. The religion has done its job, and the kings are now destroying the power of the church. Whatever church that is, it is now being destroyed, and it will not exist anymore. And the 10 kings are going to take over it, and that's kind of why you get the sense that these 10 kings might very well be Islamic, because they would only be able to be friends for a little while, and then they would want the Christianity or the Western civilization destroyed. Okay, and so fire, we all know in the Bible is used for one of two things: purification and judgment. So this is going to be judgment here. It's going to be destruction, and then the 10 horns are going to take over. Verse 18: the woman whom you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. So here we've got an indication that this Babylon is possibly not just some generic term that covers this world system, though it does. In this case, it's really kind of saying it is a city, it is a location, and that it is going to be the seat of what the Antichrist is going to do. Now, what city is that? We don't know. I know you'd like me to give the answer, but God forbid me to do it. I know it, but he said I couldn't tell you. There are a lot of possibilities, because you see, as we get into this next chapter, that there is a great economic aspect to Babylon, the Babylon of Revelation. This is just focused on the religious part of it. So if we look at possible cities today, the ones that are being mentioned, New York City, because that was one of the reasons why the 9/11 thing took place, was because it was the center of the economy, the world economy. They were trying to destroy Western economy. London's another possibility because of their financial setting. Rome could be a possibility, and even Babylon itself, Babylon being rebuilt and being established. a lot of people think that that's not that doesn't seem likely because it's located, you know, Iraq is not the most advanced country in the world. There is a train of thought out there that talked about the war in Iraq, and that one of the reasons that the war took place. Now remember, this is like one of those conspiracy theory things. That one of the reasons the war in Iraq took place was so that the puppet masters, whoever they may be, could get control of Babylon, so that they could rebuild Babylon. And there's already supposedly already been moves to create this new currency system in Babylon that they're going to push throughout the world, and that Babylon itself will become the center of the world economy, if you will. Now, like I said, that's one of those left field, way out there things. There's supposedly proof of this all taking place, but you know, it's not widely believed. But it's, you know, you look at the way things move so quickly now. It's a possibility that, you know, if a group really wanted to make Babylon the seat of the world economy, and they could do it. It wouldn't take much to have it happen.
Oh, no, I was just going to add, I know Saddam Hussein, the restoration of ancient Babylon, that city, that was one of his like pet projects.
Yes.
He really funneled a lot of his money into restoration. How much he restored, I do not know, but that was one of his passions.
Yeah, he believed that he was King Nebuchadnezzar reincarnated. So he was going to rebuild the city of Babylon.
And he had the statue.
Yeah, I
Did it
mean,
tumble down?
a lot of the stuff, yeah. Yeah, but it didn't have,
It wasn't 18 feet high.
no, and it wasn't gold headed or
Oh,
anything. But anyway.
It did crumble.
It did crumble, yes it did. So yeah, I mean, that's one of the things we're going to talk about in chapter 18, because that's going to be dealing with the political Babylon. So what we're going to find, at any rate, is there's going to be a period of time where the world is going to find this one religion is going to be created, and everyone's going to get on board with it. And you know that it's got to be a religion that allows people to be what they want to be, and then feel like, well, this is the way God made me, so I'm going to do this, or, you know, it's going to be a perverted form of whatever religion's big. Right now, like I said, it looks like Christianity is the #1 candidate for that, because so many churches have already diluted the message, and they're not preaching the Bible. So anyway, any questions on that? Comments? No? Okay. Finished my first notebook. So now we're starting the second one. It was 50 cents.
No, for
I don't-
knowledge.
Oh, huh? Oh, you want the knowledge? Oh. Well, that'll be a little bit more, 75. All right, so we're in chapter 18 of Revelation, and we're going to be talking about the political and economic, really the economic Babylon more specifically. And so we're going to talk about Babylon falling. Let's see. Now this is what's left of the ziggurat that was built in Babylon. Doesn't look like much, does it? And here's as you can see, Google Earth. This is the layout of what Babylon looked like. It's amazing what these satellites can do. They can actually go through dirt and find the ruins underneath the sand, you know, and give you a picture of it. But this is the layout here, and then this is what Hussein rebuilt. And off here in the left, this left top corner is where his palace was, and apparently he had a golden throne in there.
He did.
Yeah, but it wasn't. It was in the bathroom.
Oh, it was in the bathroom.
Yeah, it was in the bathroom.
And it was like, he would do like that, and it was plastic.
No, it was real gold.
Was it?
Yeah.
I'll go in the bathroom.
He wouldn't mess around. He wouldn't mess around. Okay, so you can see that there's something there. And he actually used, in rebuilding, he actually used the original bricks that were left from the original Babylon. they would take the bricks and he would stamp, I don't know how he did it, but he would stamp his name on these bricks. And so all these bricks had his name on them. And they built quite an extensive compound. Does anybody know where the original one is? It's in Germany. Germany, and one of the arches is in England. Remember they built it inside that museum? They found part of it and they reconstructed it. Anyway. All right, so verse 1, don't worry about them. After these things I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was illumined with his glory. And he cried out with a mighty voice, saying, Fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place of demons and a prison of every unclean spirit and a prison of every unclean and hateful bird. For all the nations have drunk of the wine of the passion of her immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed acts of immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich by the wealth of her sensuality. All right, so this is not a really happy place, it sounds like, does it? And this angel appears to John, and apparently this angel has come straight. We don't know what kind of angel it was. Was it a special angel? Was it an archangel? We don't know. But it must have just come from the presence of God, because he's all lit up. Okay, like Moses was when he met with God. And he says that Babylon the Great has fallen. So part of the falling of Babylon is the religion being destroyed. Now what's left is the economic aspect of it. And the unclean and hateful birds, we've talked about before, there are birds that are considered unclean. You can probably figure one of them by driving anywhere in Henry County when there's armadillo on the road. They're unclean. Eagles are unclean. You'd think eagle, but no, eagles are unclean. I think typically it's birds that eat dead flesh. They're flesh eaters. All right. So it wouldn't be the cute little birds probably that come out and up to your bird feeder and eat your seeds, and little hummingbirds that come up and take your nectar from your mixture. All right, so all the nations have drunk of the wine of the passion of her immorality. So this isn't going to be something that's just going to be a local occurrence. This is a worldwide event. These nations will understand that in order to survive and to prosper, they're going to have to jump in and be part of this system. And that's the impact that Great Babylon is going to have. And the two main ones we're going to be talking about today are the kings of the earth and the merchants of the earth, because they're the ones that are going to be mostly impacted by the destruction of the economic Babylon. Okay? All right, so verse 4, I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, so that you will not participate in her sins and receive of her plagues, for her sins have piled up as high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. So who is the angel speaking to? It's believers. Believers who are maybe in a congregation where they are not the norm, that they're the exception. And what the call is to separate ourselves from the church that is apostate, and do not be a part of it, so that you avoid the judgment that they're going to have. So that's one of the reasons why the church, an apostate church, is a likely candidate for the world religion. Okay? What was it? I read something, the Pope, what did he do? It was really like, there's a tribe in the Pacific Ocean someplace, and their religion is based on child sacrifice. And apparently they're still able to do it, and the Pope went and blessed their ceremony. It's like, what? So you can see that we're all, you look, all I gotta do is look at the church. And I'm not saying this church, I'm talking about the church, and seeing what's going on, and the things that they're accepting, the things that they're, I think any time that we're in a position where we feel like we have to justify the Bible, we're in trouble. You know, the Bible is what the Bible is. And we don't have to come up with arguments to defend what it says and why it says it. It says what it says. And we have gotten to a point, and I think this is probably a pendulum swing for so much of our recent history. Christianity was so rigid, very conservative. The Victorian aspect of, you don't do this, you don't do that, you never misbehave. Kids can't misbehave at church because people look at you and go, "You're bad parents." The fact your kids are just bad kids anyway. But they're going to do what they want to do. But this fear, this constant fear, and I believe my parents operated under that. This constant fear that we were going to do something that was going to shame them or cause them to be embarrassed in public. I mean, we toed the line, and if we didn't, we had a little conversation with my father when we got home. But that was not uncommon. We weren't the only ones like that. And so we moved from that. Now what's the opposite direction? They're just let them do what they want to do. Let them discover themselves. They're 6 years old. They know they want to be a girl even if they're a boy. I mean, yeah, they're 6 years old. They know. It's just like this total opposite swing. We never seem to stop in the middle, but we're at that point where we're way over here, and we as a church are accepting things that God specifically says are not acceptable, for fear that we don't want to rock any boats or make anybody feel bad, or it's that emotional thing. But what did Christ have to say about that? Where is it? Where is it? I thought I had it in here. We'll come up to it in a second. All right, so we've got the nations and the earth, nations and the merchants. So verse 4, we already said that one. All right, so this is some of the stuff I've already said. We talk about the prosperity doctrine. Well, one of the things that in the Revelation that God is judging is what? Greed, the love of money, doing whatever it takes to make more money, become wealthier and wealthier. And the prosperity doctrine is just saying, well, as a church, you're the king's kids. If anybody deserves it, you deserve it. Well, that's the same message that's going on in Revelation. So, and that's been around for years, and so we've, the other issue, sex is sacred, homosexuality is forbidden, transgender defies God's order, murderers are spared instead of being, this reminds me, somewhat off the topic, but did you know there's a law in California that you can shoplift up to $950 worth of stuff and not be prosecuted?
Yes. What?
Yep, walk out the store with it.
You can walk out of the store with it. No one's going to stop you. No one's going to call the police. I don't know how they figure it's $950. I guess they figured nobody can carry out $950 worth of stuff on their own, or more than that. But you can just walk out the store, and they won't report you. The police won't come after you. It has to do with, okay, now, that sounds absurd, but then if you put in their warm and fuzzy feeling about it, it's like, oh, that's sweet. It's their part of their poverty and low income program. For people who can't afford to buy the stuff themselves, they're allowed to take it. It's like California's whacked out.
So they can go in multiple times and just keep
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And they're doing it. It's
Yeah.
on the news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Heard about
They
Minneapolis,
show it on
right?
TV.
No. Well, it's in Minnesota.
They disbanded the police force.
Totally.
Totally. They're gonna have a public safety group. Yeah.
They're gonna bring back all the crossing guards.
Yeah. Come on.
There are no chasing laws too, so if someone's running away from, they can't.
Let them go. Good golly.
I wonder what they're doing with the prison systems.
So anyway, yeah. Well, that's the next step.
Yes,
They're gonna grandfather them. Go. Well, they shouldn't have been arrested.
right, just let them all go.
So anyway. So that's anyway. Paul Washer said American Christianity is based more on a godless culture than it is the Word of God, and that's becoming more and more true as we go along. okay? So we'll skip all of that. Verse 21, in Matthew 7, 21 through 23, in response to the come out of her, my people, Jesus said, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father in heaven. There's going to be a lot of people that believe that they're doing what God wants them to do, but they're going to find that that's not the case, and Christ is going to say that I don't know who you are. You're not in my book. And so that's the danger that we have of being caught up in this cultural Christianity, because it can lead us down that road of we're not doing what Christ originally called us to do. Okay? All right.
Is this talking specifically to Israel?
What?
Or, I mean, it's talking to believers, but is that all believers?
Yes,
Or
it'd be all believers. It'd be Gentiles as well as Jews. You talking about in the
Yeah.
Revelation or the one of Luke?
No, the one in Revelation.
Well, even Luke was preaching to the Jews. He wasn't preaching to, but it'd be believers. Yeah, if you're not a believer, you might as well just stay there.
We're right.
Okay. Okay, let's move on. Verse 6. This is her punishment. Pay her back even as she has paid, and give back to her double according to her deeds. In the cup which she has mix twice as much for her. To the degree that she glorified herself and lived sensuously, to the same degree give her torment and mourning. For she says in her heart, I sit as a queen, and I am not a widow, and will never see mourning. The mourning like they're sad, not the after night. For this reason, in one day her plagues will come, pestilence and mourning and famine, and she will be burned up with fire, for the Lord God who judges her is strong. So we see two things in play here. And if you're not familiar with the Old Testament, you won't understand this because it sounds like God's being cruel. But this is exactly what the Jews operated under in the Torah. Okay? There was a law that if you stole something from somebody else, you had to pay back double. I don't know if you remember that when we went through it, but that's where this comes from. All right, the harlot has taken away people from God, and so she had to pay double what she gave out. And then in terms of her glorification of herself, it's same for same. Okay, so there's going to be the same level of punishment given to her for what she had done in her own actions. All right, so this is all based on God's. This isn't him going, you know what? This time I'm going to give double. You're going to be really suffering now. This was something that's already been in place since the Exodus. Okay. Okay. So the question is, it says, for this reason, in one day, how could you possibly cause all this damage in one day? Well, I mean, God can do anything he wants, but what do you think most people think? Maybe atomic nuclear bomb, maybe? So here's what I was talking about. The lex talionis is proportional justice. Babylon's punishment for glorifying herself is an equal measure of torment and sorrow. Babylon will pay double for what she did to others, while an equal measure for what she did for herself. So that what she did to other people by seducing, by the murderings, the executions of persecutions of the saints, and then seducing people away from God, that's where the double portion comes from. Okay? All right, for the lament for Babylon. Verse 9. And the kings of the earth who committed acts of immorality and lived sensuously with her will weep and lament over her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance because of the fear of her torment, saying, Woe, woe, the great city, Babylon, the strong city, for in 1 hour your judgment has come. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the kings of the earth, the rulers. And these acts of immorality are this. it's the unfaithfulness to God. It's their separation from God and worshiping the harlot that the immorality is talking about here. And live sensuously with her. That word sensuously, when you look it up or when you do the search on it, means out of control. So they were just out of control. There was no ration to what they were doing. More and more and more, you know, like if you hadn't eaten for 3 days, like you'd see a buffet in front of you, you wouldn't be taking like one chicken leg and then maybe a few peas and carrots and then go back to your table and sitting and eating it and then go back. I mean, you'd like piling stuff on. And so there's this idea of just wanting to amass more and more and more and more, and that becomes your focus of what it is that you're doing in your life. And we see some of that even today. I mean, there are people who have way more than they need and they still want more. It's never enough. It's never enough. It's never enough. And at some point, the desire for more materialism comes at the cost of other people. You can't have that kind of desire and not have it impact other people. Right? And so that's what's going on here. They're just out of control. So the city's burning, and where are they? They're in there trying to save everybody, right? No, they're cowards. They're like not even close and like, this isn't good, you know, because they see the meal ticket is gone, it's disappeared, and that they don't want to have any part of it now. They don't want that judgment on them. But at this point, the city Babylon is destroyed. It will never return at this point. Okay? Verse 11, and the merchants of the earth weep and mourn over her because no one buys their cargoes anymore. Cargoes of gold and silver and precious stones and pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and every kind of citron wood and every article of ivory and every article made from very costly wood and bronze and iron and marble and cinnamon and spice and incense and perfume and frankincense and wine and olive oil and fine flour and wheat and cattle and sheep and cargoes of horses and chariots and slaves and human lives. That's pretty extensive. I don't think there's too much left off that, maybe a computer or two. But the idea here is that these items are listed specifically so we don't get caught up in this allegorizing what they are. But what could the gold mean? What could the silver mean? These are real things. These are items. These are luxuries that people are pursuing, not necessities. And so that's what's going to be gone here. You know, luxuries are typically where a merchant's going to try and make their money because they can charge whatever they want, and because it's a luxury, people will buy it, and that's where they make the greatest profit from. You're not going to jack up. Well, you could if there was a shortage of it, but.
Yeah, I was just curious. With all these judgments that have happened on the earth, this is happening at what, the midpoint?
Yes. Well, yes.
Somebody's doing so well economically.
This part of it would be at the end, because the religion is at the midpoint. So this would be at the end.
Yeah, it's just curious to me that somebody would be doing well economically during this time with all these judgments that have happened.
Well, yeah. I'm not saying it's a bunch of people, but there'd be enough that would be above some of the suffering that they would continue to flourish in a situation because they had the power and the position to flourish in the midst of all that suffering. I mean, typically the ones who suffer the most are the middle class and lower class because they don't have the financial wherewithal to survive that kind of thing. So, you know, when you get in those kind of situations where the chaos exists, and from all the plagues and the damage that's being done, you have this group that always rises up above it and somehow manages to profit from that chaos, from that difficulty.
I wonder if it's like a scavenger type of system, because one thing that is consistent through this is the death toll is coming up. When people are dying and all of that, their goods are left behind.
Right.
if that might contribute to that economic prosperity of that group. But, you
I mean,
know,
I'm sure
that's
it could,
just-
I'm sure it could. But again, this is a situation where they have been able to financially rise above this economy. And if you think about the economy, that economic aspect of Babylon, it would have to be a one world monetary system. So whoever's involved in, it's kind of like when you, a company sells stock maybe. You know, the people on the inside get their free stock because, you know, they're way up here, the officers, and everybody else has to pay for theirs. So if you're part of this, creating this economic monetary system, perhaps you get, you know, you manage to glean some of it, and then it's going to kind of filter out to people that are close to you and that kind of thing. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just guessing.
I wonder if that's part of the reason why they were so sad when it was destroyed, because that was the hub where they could actually get stuff from.
It may be that was the one location they were able to, everything was able to come from. So, I don't know. I mean, it's a part of it, but I mean, you think about, I mean, people would panic if an explosion destroyed the stock market on Wall Street. I mean, just think about how they would freak out. 401ks would be in disarray, stock prices would be all over the place, and it would impact the world, because all the stock markets around the world invest in stocks that are in New York and Wall Street. So it's a kind of a snowballing effect, and it may very well be that that's the location where everything is controlled. So now you have the control of the hub. You take a hub off of the spokes of a wheel, what happens to the spokes? They all fall off, and the wheel falls apart. So it may be that's kind of the thing we're talking about, is that that's the center of where everything's taking place, and when that's destroyed, there's nothing to hold those spokes in place. And so these guys are like, okay, they're looking at it not so much being able to buy the stuff as sell the stuff. You know, they can't get it to sell it now. They're not going to be able to make their money. So, and I guess apparently, I mean, I don't know, but it seems like maybe they figured a way to get the ships across the bloody ocean. Work through that goo. Yes, sir.
Something I thought of that's not even on par with tribulation or all this stuff in the end times was the gas shortage like over a month ago and stuff like that. Something as simple as that lasts for maybe 2 weeks. And I saw a picture online of this couple at a gas station with all these gas cans, just like filling them up. It's like, we've been having a gas shortage for like 2 weeks, and now people are trying to hoard gas, I guess, just to sell it or whatever. It's like, it's just the greed that comes in those moments. It just kicks in with people the second they just enter this little bit of crisis mode.
Right.
You know?
Right. And yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I lived through the gas shortage of the 70s, and you ain't seen lines like we had in the 70s. The people would run a gas in the line waiting to get gas. It was a nightmare. But yeah, and I think you don't forget that this is a response to what they're seeing. So in a sense, they could be just over exuberantly declaring their sorrow at the destruction of Babylon, and that it's they have associated Babylon with their financial success, and now in their minds it's gone. Okay, how it happens, and I don't know exactly how this is all going to happen, but it's going to impact the world economy. Verse 14, the fruit you long for has gone from you, and all things that were luxurious and splendid have passed away from you, and men will no longer find them. So it may very well be that Babylon, becomes this source of all of this luxury, and now that it is gone, all this stuff is going to disappear because there's no one to fill the gap. There's no one to say, okay, we'll start making the purple robes or whatever.
Craig,
Yes.
sort of a look back at Babylon, because wealth was produce and cattle, and they said they had grapes that were big as peaches, and their fruit was just world renowned. And,
Yeah.
so they were the wealthiest in that sense. And
Right.
they're
right, right. And I think when we're talking about Babylon, we're not just talking about one little city, we're talking about the city representing that whole area being reestablished. At one point, back when Babylon was first the world power, they could actually get boats up to Babylon. They had dredged out the river, so as the rivers flowed into the sea there, that they could actually move up and get cargo and take it off. And that could be done very easily now. And if it needs to be continued or widened or deepened or whatever, so it's very possible this is going to become the center of the world in terms of the economic and the end time religion. Okay, and you're exactly right. I mean, the stuff that we saw in the Babylon of Nimrod is what we're seeing now.
Wow.
And it's again that idea that the Bible is the circle. We're just going back to what to the beginning, just in a little different setting. Okay. And every shipmaster and every passenger and sailor and as many as make their living by the sea stood at a distance. Again, not really interested in being close by. And were crying out as they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, "What city is like the great city?" And they threw dust on their heads and were crying out, weeping and mourning, saying, "Woe, woe, the great city, in which all who had ships at sea became rich by her wealth, for in 1 hour she has been laid waste." Okay? So it had become that center of commerce. All right, let's move on. And again, this is going to create that kind of chaos in the world when the economy collapses. If you have ever studied the Depression, the Great Depression, I mean, the chaos when the stock market fell was just unbelievable. How many have seen one? It's a Wonderful Life. What happened on the day that the stock market crashed? People were just rushing to the bank to get all their money out. Unfortunately, they didn't realize the banks didn't have their money there. That was one of the problems. They didn't have the money to support the deposit. They had extended their investing. The bank had invested too much in the stock market. When the stock market crashed, they didn't have the money to pay people, and that's why they're trying to get people to take, $100, don't take all $500 of it. Anyway, that's your history lesson for the day. So it's going to create this chaos because it's going to destroy all the social barriers now. Okay. So rejoice over her, O heaven, and you saints and apostles and prophets, because God has pronounced judgment for you against her. Oh, wait, what just happened? We went from this woe, woe, woe to rejoice. Well, we moved from her earth to heaven. Verse 20 takes place in heaven. And why would they be rejoicing? Remember the guys under the altar that were praying, they were asking God for vengeance?
Mm-hmm.
This is it. The judgment has finally come. Okay? So that's why they're rejoicing. It's not rejoicing at the suffering, it's rejoicing that the judgment has finally come and it will be stopped.
Greg, I heard a friend of mine say that God is the slowest person that's always on time.
Yeah. I have to write that one down.
And we
That's
need
good.
to
That's
be
good.
reminded too, that in God's economy, it says in an hour, that we wrote down. And these scientists and all have through the years lied to us and, said that, like, for example, straw layers were like millions of years and all that. Mount St. Helens, once you heard of Mount St. Helens, it kind of disappeared from the news scene. And the reason why is it totally destroyed evolutionary theory. Because they said these lines were like, and in that one blast, there was a leading what's the dirt guys?
Geologist.
He was a big evolutionist atheist, raised by Christian parents, but got in college and that transformation took place where science and God didn't agree, which is not the case now. But Mount St. Helens laid 60 feet of strata in that one explosion. and these lines were all laid in it, and he was converted back to his original faith. But what made him do it, his thing was, he had introduced, he
No
had
problem.
introduced a, theory that we need to bring back, the flood theory, because he said he connected in Kentucky, the coal layers and all to massive log jams from a flood, bringing all the logs together, and then it formed as coal. And that was his theory, and his friends thought he was out of his mind, but that was his thesis, all right? Well, at Mount St. Helens, after he saw 60 feet of strata, he wondered about, you remember seeing the picture of all the logs, just it laid down like, I don't know how many thousands of acres of just logs. So he went to the nearest lake from Mount St., and it was called Spirit Lake, interesting enough. And he dove down. And one of the things that he had proclaimed is, in Yellowstone Park, there was trees that were petrified, and they were in different layers of strata. He dove down in that lake, and every layer of trees, just like Yellowstone, was laid down there, and the ones that had first blown and gotten the blast were petrified, blown out and sunk, because they were petrified, sunk to the bottom. And then the ones that, just kind of blew out as the heat diminished were layered in sediment. And that was just repeated in the Spirit. He was underwater when he asked Jesus to forgive him for believing all the lies that science did agree. So we need to remember God can do like
Oh, yeah.
that, what people say
Yeah.
takes 10
Yeah.
million years.
And, prophetically, the term in an hour doesn't necessarily mean 60 minutes. It's a quick time. It's coming quickly, and it's gonna happen
That's
quickly.
exactly right.
And I forgot to tell you that, but, there's a group called, I can't remember the name of the group, but they've done research on the flood. And I watched some of their videos, and, for such a long time, scientists used the Grand Canyon as proof of this layering and millions and millions and millions of years, and they said, no, look, this didn't happen over millions of years. And they used the strata to explain exactly why, because it's all like smooth. It's not like, divots like you would normally see where, water might create, it's like smooth, and it's constant, it's consistent.
Yeah.
And, so, at any rate, you don't want to get caught up in using science to prove the Bible, but by the same token, where you can stand up and say the Bible's right and science is wrong, it's always nice to be able to do that too. Okay.
Well, it proves that they're friends now. Science and God, not scientists, but science and God agree.
Yeah. Well, I think we talked about before how originally science was done by Christian men.
Right.
It wasn't an
Real
attack
science.
on Christianity.
Real
It was,
science.
yeah. So anyway, verse 14, the fruit you long for is gone. So what's happening is when Babylon is destroyed, it is destroyed forever. There's nothing available, nothing. It's not gonna be rebuilt, and there's no, you can't go in and kind of clean up and move on. All right, did I ever read that one? Shipmasters? Yeah. All right, I don't know how I must have kept hitting it by mistake. All right. In John 16, verses 1 through 4, Jesus said, "These things I have spoken to you so that you may be kept from stumbling. They will make you outcast from the synagogue. But an hour is coming for everyone who kills you to think that he is offering service to God." Now, how many times have I heard that scripture being read, and it didn't even dawn on me what Christ was saying? The people who, the point here is that these killings are going to be seen as an act of God, that they're serving God by doing that. And you think about, wait a minute, we're supposed to be, getting along with each other, and the death, the persecution is going to come from people of their own type. So believers are going to be killed by believers. Okay? These things they will do because they have not known the Father or me, because they've gotten away from the Bible. The only way you know about God is through the Bible. Right? But these things I have spoken to you so that when their hour comes, you may remember that I told you of them. These things I did not say to you at the beginning because I was with you. These things I did not say. So Christ is already kind of saying, look, this is what's going to be coming down the road. So be prepared. All right, verse 21, then a strong angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, so will Babylon, the great city, be thrown down with violence and will not be found any longer. Okay, so that's just the allegorical picture of the fact that it's gone. You throw a millstone into the ocean, what happens to it? It goes to the bottom.
Unless it's Elijah. Or no, who was it? Was it Elijah? That the rock float?
The iron floated.
I just.
Okay. Well, this isn't Elijah, so at any rate, so it's going to be again, the destruction is final. It's complete. All right, and that really has a connection with Zechariah. I'm not going to go through it because it's a long piece of reading, but let's just start in verse 7. It says, a lead cover was lifted up, and this is a woman sitting inside the ephah. So this woman was placed inside this ephah, which is a measuring, I don't know, it wouldn't be a bowl, but it would be a container. And she's placed inside of this. Verse 8, then he said, this is wickedness. And he threw her down into the middle of the ephah and cast the lead weight on its opening. So this woman is evil, put into this container, and then this millstone is put on top of it to seal it. Okay. Then I lifted up my eyes and looked, and there 2 women were coming out with the wind in their wings, and they had wings like the wings of a stork. And I lifted up the ephah between the earth and the heavens. These are, you might think the picture is something very beautiful, but a stork is an unclean bird to the Jews. So these would not be considered heavenly angels. Okay. I said to the angel who was speaking to me, where are they taking the ephah? Then he said to me, to build a temple for her in the land of Shinar. And when it is prepared, she will be set there on her own pedestal. Shinar is where Babylon is located. So in Zechariah, he's kind of prophesying what this whole thing is that's going to take place. This location is being set up for this evil woman to come and rule from there. Okay. All right. Let's get that. Okay, verse 22. And the sound of harpists and musicians and flute players and trumpeters will not be heard in you any longer, and no craftsman of any craft will be found in you any longer. And the sound of a mill will not be heard in you any longer. And the light of a lamp will not shine in you any longer. And the voice of the bridegroom and bride will not be heard in you any longer. For your merchants were the great men of the earth, because all the nations were deceived by your sorcery. So there's nothing. Okay? There's just nothing there anymore. It might even look more devastated than this picture right here. And verse 24, and in her was found the blood of prophets and saints and of all who have been slain on the earth. So the judgment is taking place because of exactly what verse 24 says. It's because of the killing, slaying of the prophets and the saints, and for seducing the rest of the world to her form of religion, to her belief system. And so that's what's going to become of that. Now, again, if we take a look and we think that if we feel that the religion at the end times is an apostate church, that's what that verse was for. Jesus said, large crowds were now traveling Jesus, and he turned and said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. and whoever does not carry his cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. These verses don't always fit with what the world thinks Jesus is, or what the church teaches that Jesus is. You know, that he's a nice guy. He loves everybody. He doesn't judge anybody. And then here he's saying, right in these verses here, that now is he saying you have to hate your mother? Now the hate really means you have to love me more than them. And there's going to be a time when that is going to come. We're going to be tested in that. And the choice is not. The choice is going to be Christ or something else. And if you choose something else, then there's not an option. You're choosing them or it over Christ. And that being the case, you're not going to be a disciple of his. And if you're not a disciple of his, then you're not in his book of life. So there's a lot of responsibility that comes with being a believer that we don't always necessarily hear about. There are repercussions or consequences for us not following Christ in the biblical directive, in the way that he says. And it could very well be that you have to make a choice between Christ and your family sometimes, or brothers and sisters, okay, or your church. You know, it may be a situation where you're in a church, someone's in a church, and they realize that they are no longer preaching the gospel. It's time to move on. You're not going to be able to change the church by standing there by yourself. The chances of you being sucked into what they're doing is going to be greater than your ability. So who wants an end to the world economic system? It's only the 10 kings who destroyed Babylon. The New York City attack on 9/11, because they are seen as the center of the world economic system. Islam hates all who participate in the world economic system and want it destroyed. Islam might be the driving force behind the destruction of Babylon, because they see it as the perpetuation of Western thought. Okay, so there's a number of players in this thing that 100 years ago wouldn't have been considered a possibility, but we can see now how even now one of the things about that we talked about this way back in Exodus is that the Semitic tribes do a lot of infighting. They fight with each other as much as they fight with anybody else. And the reason that they fight with each other is because they want to be the one that creates this Muslim empire. But when it comes to fighting Christians, Christians, and they consider West as Christian, I guess because it's not Muslim. But when it comes to Christians and Western and Israel, they will combine. They will join each other because they have that common enemy. And so we see that kind of infighting going on, but when the rubber meets the road, they're going to come together to destroy the Western world's economy and the religion. Any comments, questions? No?
Another reminder that history is his story. God writes history.
Yeah.